2 of how to make a cape, and in this video we learn how to put on the leather or fake leather patches and how to add a skirty bit onto the bottom. Right, you've got some fun stuff to do now. Not that it wasn't fun before, of course. If you are going to be adding some kind of accent elbow pads and the belty bit at the back, you need to cut them out now. Now what I want you to think about is, there's no reason why they need to be elbow pads. Like an oval, they could be a star or a heart or a diamond, anything you want. So when you cut them out, you're cutting them out for these areas, but also, not yet, but later, you'll also need to cut them out for where your hands come through, and if you're going to do the bib at the front as well. But for now, we're just dealing with the elbow pads and the belty bit at the back. So when you're happy with the shapes that you have and the proportions that they are, you can then cut them out of your leather or fake leather or whatever it is that you're using. So lay them on the back, draw around them, and then just cut them out. So the next thing that you need to think about when you've cut them out is the placement of them. But I think the elbow pads need to be more or less in line with where your elbows would be. So I like my elbow pads quite low. Then you need to think about the belty bit. Do you want that low down there? Do you want it high up there? I'm going to go for it being a bit high. Now this is when we start using our fabric spray adhesive. Now put some newspaper underneath just in case, and have lots of newspaper on top where you're going to do all your spraying, because you don't want any fine bits of spray going onto your cape. Get the spray and you spray it on until it all kind of looks a bit white. So loads and loads. And it's one of those sprays where it goes really cold. Now you've got to be very sure, you've got to be very sure where you're putting it now, because once it's on, it's on. And I'm fairly sure I want it about there. Now when you press down, you'll feel it's really, really cold. And as it goes off, it will get warmer. So keep pressing it when it's still cold. Just press. Now you can use Bonder Web and it would work just as well. It's just this is so much quicker. Let it go off maybe for, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes. And then it's ready to sew. And it really doesn't clog up your needle at all, so long as you let it go off for a bit. Now decide how far away from the edge you want to be. I'm kind of like 1/4 of an inch. Right, now going backwards and forwards. I'm using a little marker on my, oh look at my nail varnish. I'm using, use my thumb, a little marker on my foot that is 1/4 of an inch away. And then I'm just slowly moving the material around. Now this is fake leather onto fabric, and I don't need a special needle to sew it on. Now for one of my projects, I used taffeta with spots on, and I ironed Bonder Web onto the back, and then I pressed that onto the cape, and the Bonder Web kind of makes it a bit stiff. So that worked well. Now when you get to the end, you shouldn't really go backwards and forwards because it doesn't look nice. You should pull the threads through to the other side and tie them off, but I'm not. So just use exactly the same method for stitching on the belty bit as well. So look, that's a bit nice, isn't it? Oh, I'm glad I put that green on. Now, of course, it looks absolutely fine like this. We've got the lovely green on the back, but because I want it to coordinate with my back, I've created these things, which I'm going to frame where the arm comes out, and then put one on one side and one on the other side, a bit like that. So I'll glue those on in the same way that I did the elbow pads and the belt at the back. I'll glue them on and then I'll stitch them. Now, if you are doing this, put a little pin, yes, a pin, tree and a pin to close the opening so that you can align it properly. Now, you can do it in two halves, like two semicircles. I think that might be a bit easier to put on that way. And then when it goes off, you can remove the pin and then it will be ready to sew all neatly, hopefully. Oh, I really like it. In order to work out how much you need to cut out for the skirty bit that goes on the bottom, skirt bit, you've got to measure all the way around the bottom of the upper part of your cape. Now, for me, I measured the front of it and the back of it, and the front was 110 and the back's 110. So that meant that my measurement was 220 centimetres. Now, if I just cut out fabric that was 220 centimetres, there wouldn't be any gathering at all, so it wouldn't look very skirty. So what you have to do is, you have to sort of double it. You might prefer it to be 1.5 times the amount, but I wanted mine kind of pleated gathered, so I think I need quite a lot of fullness, so I've done it double. Now, if I double to 20 centimetres, that's going to be 4 meters 40 of a strip of fabric, which is a bit of a waste. So I've done it in two halves. I've done 2 meters 20 and 2 meters 20, so I've got 2 strips. Now, the width of it, I've done it as 36 centimetres, but you can do yours as long as you want. Now, once you've cut them out, you're going to have to finish off the hem of it with bias binding or overlocking it, but also I want you to come up the sides as well. And in part 1 of how to make a cape, I show you how I do this cheaty method of applying bias binding. Now, when you've done that, I'm going to show you how I do a blind stitch hem using the sewing machine. Now, on your sewing machine, you'll notice that you probably have this sort of zigzag stitch where it does a zigzag and then it goes along a couple of stitches straight, and then it does a zigzag and then it goes a couple of stitches. Now, that's what we're going to use today to do the blind hem stitch. Now, if you don't have that special blind stitch, I think you can do it quite well with the zigzag stitch as well. So this is how you do a blind stitch using your sewing machine. Now, before we do our blind stitch, I want you to do this for me. I want you to fold back your hem to before we begin doing our blind stitch, I want you to fold back your hem to however you want it to be, however long you want it to be. Now, I've done mine to about 3 or 4 centimetres. And then when you've done that, I want you to fold back on one side of your fabric. I want you to fold in the same, about 3 centimetres. Now, that's going to be at the back, because we have a little split at the back. And then finally, on the other side, I want you to fold back a facing, which is going to fall at the front, that is the same as your upper facing. And I can't remember exactly, but I think mine's about 8 centimetres. And then when you folded back your facings, put a little notch to show where it folds back at the top, and do the same for the little split bit at the back where you've got your facing at the back. Now when we do this blind stitch, we don't do it all the way to the edge, okay, because we're going to have to fiddle about with our facings afterwards. So I'm stopping on both ends. I'm stopping about 10 centimetres, 15 centimetres away from the edge. So this is what we do. We've pressed our hem, okay? We've pressed our hem, but then we just need to turn our fabric under, okay? Now what's going to happen is we're going to stitch along this side, and then the zigzags will pick up a tiny amount of the fabric as it goes along. I've got my hem pressed like this, but I can't sew it like this. I've got to flop it back, and I put it under the machine. And put my light on, that will help. And I'm not going to start right at the end. I'm going to start a little bit of a way in. Now where I'm going to sew, when it sews straight, it's going to be on this bias binding or on the little bit of the hem with the overlocked edge. So it's going to sew, so I'll do it really slowly. So it's going to sew a couple of stitches going along, which will be on here, and then when it does its V, it just goes one stitch in on that fold, and then it will go along again, and then it will do one stitch in, catching the fabric on the fold, and you basically do it going all the way along. So look, when you've done that, okay, see I'm running my finger along there. When you've done that, it should look like this, but then on the other side, you don't see anything at all. Now if you're using a fabric that isn't quilted, what you might see are a couple of little dots, quite similar to this. Here, look. You'll see a couple of little dots like that, but if you use an invisible thread, you know, it will look fine. Now in terms of finishing off these facing bits, I'm going to do mine by hand afterwards. And I'm just going to hand sew it down there and a little bit up here. Right, now we've got to prepare this strip of fabric so it can form a skirt now onto the bottom. And to do that, you can either gather your fabric, but today I'm going to do it with pleats. So I'll show you how I do that. And guess what? We've got to use pins. Now, starting at the centre back, with the end of your skirt where you've got the smaller facing, which is going to form where you overlap and form a split at the back, that's my centre front, but I'm starting the width of my facing beyond it, okay? So I'm starting, what, 4 centimetres beyond it, and I've put a pin in there. And then I've put a pin all the way down at the other end where my front facing is. Now this is very, very important. So we're at the side now with the front facing. The position of where you put the front of your skirt bit has to line up with where you've got a notch on your facing, okay, for the top. Because what happens is, when we've applied our skirt, we'll then come around with that top facing, stitch it like that, right sides together, and then it will become all nice and neat, like that. So you've got to leave this open, and you've got to start at the notch of where your facing fold is for the upper part of the cake. So I put a pin there initially, and then I put a pin in the middle, and then I gradually started doing equal size pleats. Now there is a rule about when you do pleating, and that is that all your pleats should fold towards the back. So if you're happy with the spacing of your pleats, now you're ready to sew them on. Now I did forget to say that when you put your pins in, put them in vertically rather than horizontally, because then it's easier to sew them. So what you've got to do is you've got to start sewing from one end or the other. Make sure you can sort of see your pins as you sew, so whatever side that is. So I'm starting at my front where that notch is, and I've got that leg facing, not attached, okay? So you're going to put that under the machine, decide what your seam allowance is, and put the needle in. So that's that facing from the top of the cape. I've aligned the skirty bit so it starts where I've put that notch where the facing folds back, and I put the needle in. So I'm going to take the first pin out. I'm going to go forwards and backwards. So I'm on a straight stitch now, and I just start working my way around. Now I haven't got a very big seam allowance. My seam allowance is about a large centimetre. Now make sure you squash down your pleats as you sew all the way round. So as you come to the end, we do include and fold back the facing, the little facing, the one for the split at the back, and we just sew right across it. Oh, and then we can try it on. Look at that, wow. Right, we're now going to stitch down that facing. So look at this, there's the jacket. That's the bit of facing that we didn't stitch, okay? I'm going to flop that over so my fabric is right sides together, and then all you have to do is bring that facing over. Okay, so that's how it looks. I've brought the facing over like that, fabric's all right sides together, facing over, and I'm just going to stitch along the same line that I stitched along when I attached the skirty bit to the cape, like this. Forwards and backwards, and just sew straight along. So when you turn it the right way round, it should look really neat. Now you have to repeat all of that again, because now you have to attach the skirt onto the other side. So with the other side of the skirt, look how much we're overlapping it. So my facing is like that, and I'm overlapping it about the same amount. So the same seam allowance, still straight stitch. Just work your way all the way round and just take out the pins as you go. So like on the other side, as I'm coming to the front, so it's finishing right by the notch on the upper part of the cape to show where we fold back the facing. So look at that split. Where is it? So there's a split at the back. It looks so kind of glamorous, doesn't it, with the skirty bit at the bottom, but you're not quite finished yet, because don't forget, you need to do the facing to this side now. I am really excited about wearing my new quilted cape. I do have to finish the inside, So I'm going to overlock it or use bias binding. I also need to put a little button on here, but that is not bad, and I'm wearing it straight away. Thank you so much for watching Stitchless TV. Now if you make your cape from watching part 1 and part 2 of this video tutorial, don't forget to share it with me on my Facebook page, Stitchless TV Sewing Vlog. See you again very soon. Bye!